Welcome to Creating Better Products, where we explore the real world stories from product leaders, not just their successes, but also their failures and their lessons learned. You will get practical tips that you can apply tomorrow. I'm your host, Sabrina Mach. I have almost 2 decades of experience and I love learning from others. This is why my mission is to share the stories of amazing product and design professionals with you and the world. And today we will speak about measuring product market fit. Using a more quantitative approach to validating customer pains, value propositions, and product solutions. The things, the ideas that we come up with for solving customer pains. We will not look at, hey, can we build it? Is it possible to build it in the technology we have? No. We will look at people. What are real problems that people have? And how can we validate whether we're solving a problem meaningfully for them? I think that's cool. I love this kind of stuff. Tech is important. But what's tech without solving a problem for people? So let's start talking to our guest. And that is a really cool person. I know I say this about everyone, but today my guest is Bill Albert, and Bill is very well known in the user experience world. He wrote the book on measuring the user experience with Tom Tallis that was published back in 2008. Actually, one book that I read at university back in the days. And Bill, you are also the co-editor of the Journal of User Experience, which you've been doing for the past 12 years, but also your experience in general is really impressive. You've been the executive director of the User Experience Center at Bentley University for 14 years. And recently you founded the Greenlight Idea Lab, which is an agency that helps companies focus on product validation. So that's spot on with the topic that we want to talk about today, which is measuring product market fit. So Bill, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Sabrina. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. And Bill, I'm really curious around your journey into this topic. When I look at your experience measuring user experience and measuring the impact that we have on people's lives seems to be something that's been with you for a long time. So I'm really curious about your journey into this topic, but also what's kept you passionate around measuring that impact over the years.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. It actually, the answer goes back many, many years. I was finishing up my PhD and doing a postdoc, looking at design of navigation systems in cars and getting into human factors and HCI, and ended up pivoting into industry and starting to learn about user experience and really how to design products that are easy to use. At that time in the late 90s, it was all about just usability. Can people use it? And several years later, I was really fortunate to meet and then end up work with Tom Tallis at Fidelity Investments. And Tom and I we shared a tremendous amount in common. And one important thing was around rigor. And I think both of us had a really strong desire to bring more rigor to the UX field. At that time, it was very much small sample size, qualitative, anecdotal based. This is how I think we should design it without a lot of data or evidence to support that. And I remember very clearly, the ideas kind of come at the strangest of times. I was taking up the groceries from having gone grocery shopping, and the thought occurred to me is, I wonder if there's a book about measuring UX. And so I quickly put the groceries away and I ran to my computer and I went on Amazon, and sure enough, there wasn't anything, which I didn't think that there was. And I thought, I should go to Tom and say, listen, I know this is a crazy idea, but I think we should write a book on this, because we were already starting to talk about metrics and in a lot of different ways, but it was all all over the place. There was no consensus thought. I mean, there was Sus was out there, and there was some other tools, but it didn't really cover the field like how we wanted. And people were doing whatever they were. It was very much the Wild West. And I went to Tom and I said, "Hey, I've got a crazy idea. Feel free to say no. I think we should write a book together in measurement." And he's like, "I love it. Great idea." And we basically started, that was in 2006, and started to put together that, and ended up writing 3 editions before he passed. I guess about 5 years ago now. So it's, the measurement piece has been with me for more than 20 years. Um, and really, what excites me most about it is it gives us a lens, an insight into user experience that we can't get through qualitative research. Now, I'm not dismissing qualitative. I think it's hugely valuable, and I use it probably more than quant. But we have to be able to balance. We have to at least strive for a mixed methods approach to not just get the insights into why, but understand the what, the how many, the how much that qual can't do.
Yeah. And you used the word that I found that resonates that resonates with me, which is rigor, because often user experience is still perceived more of as an art, where anyone can have an opinion and say whether a design should be this way, that way. And introducing that rigor shows that there's a bit more to that. It's not about opinion or shades of gray. It's around really what impact are we driving, and
Mm.
bringing that rigor to the field to make that more credible and make the right decisions for the impact that we're wanting to have.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, because that rigor is really what initially drove me to look at measurement, because I felt like UX was not 100% respected at the senior level. And I think part of that was because of the lack of rigor in the methodology. And I wanted to have more respect. I wanted us, all of us, our community, to have a seat at the table. And measurement was one of the ways that we could do that. People could say, okay, UX or product is saying this. There's a science behind it. We
Yeah.
cannot easily dismiss what they're saying.
And what I find interesting is that now, more recently, with founding the Greenlight Idea Lab, is that you've zoomed out from user experience to the
Mhm.
product as a whole. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What
Yeah.
triggered
Oh,
that?
yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I've been working in UX research for that's 20 years at that time. And, I think many people can relate to this, right? We're given products that um, we start to say, like, yeah, we can make it a little bit better, but are we putting proverbial lipstick on the pig? It, we, do people really want this? What problem is this solving that people care about? And it's only natural that as researchers, designers, we start asking these questions. And I think that I just honestly had enough of it. One example, when I was at Bentley, we were working on a product that was, um, if you know the Keurig or Nespresso coffee machines, right, that deliver coffee, right? Simple, you put the pot in, you turn it on, boom, you have your nice hot coffee. There was a product we were testing that does essentially the same thing, but with alcohol. So your pot, instead of French roast, it was, gin and tonic or Moscow Mule or margarita or what have you, right? And we were testing it, these prototypes, and just the use cases of it were so far fetched. They really weren't grounded in any kind of um, data. You know, just because they could make this, they assumed that people would want it. and there was lots of technical constraints around the cost of the pods and having to keep them refrigerated, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like, we have to be able to address these types of issues before they come into the lab for testing. We have to get up front and really stress test them and say, listen, what problem is this solving, or what kind of delight is this creating that doesn't exist? And so that's sort of, at least I'd been thinking about it for a while, but I ended up moving to from Bentley to a company called Mach 49 venture building group out of in Silicon Valley, that heading up their CX group and really starting to pivot into product market fit and specifically around validation. So that really kind of opened my eyes to not focusing so much on how do we make this product better, but should we build it? Really, should we do this? Who wants this? How badly do they want it? Right? How is this different? And that's really like these key fundamental questions that we should be um, pushing people on um, from the start. And that was sort of the genesis of me kind of taking that shift. And I see it as just moving along the continuum, not so much, oh, I'm going from UX to product. It's the same thing, where it's the same research, the same mindset, but we're just asking a slightly different set of questions at a different point in the product development process.
Yes. And it feels more important than ever to ask the question, should we build it?
Yeah.
With a lot of the hype around AI and technology developments, where companies feel like, oh my God, we can't keep up and we need to jump on that. There's a lot of FOMO happening with using technology. But the question is, should we build it? What problem does it solve? I
Yes.
hear a lot of companies talk about, oh, we have a problem of people adopting the AI solutions that we build. Well, the problem isn't that people don't want to use AI. It's just maybe it's not solving a meaningful problem with
Exactly.
that technology.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why with Greenlight Idea Lab, what we're trying to do is really take a more rigorous approach to how we validate new product ideas. And the foundation is customer pain in most cases, right? So
Yeah.
you think of, we have to be able to identify a pain that's worth solving. It's frequent, it's severe, it's prevalent in a larger group. It's not being solved elsewhere. There's an urgency to it, right? And if you think about, we're building a house, we're building a new product, a new business, and the pain is the foundation we're laying. We have to get the pain right. We've got no choice. If we don't get the pain right, we're almost doomed to fail, right? For the example that you just gave, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you're just building something because you think that it would be cool to, put a margarita pot in and have a margarita in, 30 seconds. People like, it turns out people like making cocktails for their friends, you know, and themselves. So, it's that pain is, I cannot stress that enough. That is the foundation, right? And then we move on into the value propositions, right? And we say, all right, now we know that this is the pain we're going to solve for. What are the different ideas that we can come up with that solve that, right? That is now from the foundation. Now we're building the framing, right, of the house. We have to get that right. And then once we get into the product solution stage, then we're thinking, all right, we know the problem and we have a really good idea about how to do that. Well, the solution can take a lot of different forms, right? We can design the interior of the house any way we want, and we can change it up. It's not that expensive, right? But we have to be able to get that pain and the idea down. It, so when we get to that solutioning prototyping stage, um, it's just a matter of changing things around, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, fascinating. The way you've described the concept with the pain being the foundation, then our solution, the value proposition being the walls, and then the prototyping specific
yeah,
things that are kind of maybe the interiors, makes me think of a concept from Stuart Brand about shearing layers. It talks about the speed of change. What can you change? Like the foundation is not something you can easily change. Walls is also harder, but still easier than the foundation. And then
mm,
you have the interiors, you have the plumbing, and so on. And with each aspect, it becomes harder and harder to change the more you move forward. So really interesting. You use that metaphor of the house around what needs to be in place first before we kind of move forward and
mm,
start building on that foundation to get something right, to bring something to market that
yeah.
truly solves a problem
I think that
for customers.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there, because that's exactly right. Right? Is if we for some reason we get all the way through, we have a solution and we launch it, we put it into market and it's not resonating, right? Okay, why is it not resonating? Is it because they just didn't like the execution, but it's a good idea? Or is it just it's not valuable? It's not solving a pain or delivering some delight that really matters to people.
Yeah.
And if it's that, then you're literally starting over. You're saying, we're going to knock the whole house down, including the foundation, and start again.
Yeah.
It's
And that is
not,
painful.
it's not a very efficient, effective way of building product, getting it into the market that's going to be successful. Um, One thing that I do believe in is in product development, there's some organizations that really say, let's launch and learn, right? Let's
Hmm.
launch the thing and we'll learn from it, and then we'll be able to make adjustments. And I just think that ultimately, in most cases, that's not effective. It is too risky, and likely you're going to go back to the beginning. It's I know that there is such a strong temptation to just let's just build it and launch it and see how it goes. Like, let's act, right? But I really think that if the goal is to launch great product quickly, I don't think that's the right strategy. I really don't. You might luck into it once, which would be almost the worst thing, because then you believe that that's the right process. But with just a little bit of research up front and being able to validate the pain and the idea will ultimately save you time and money.
Yeah.
You're 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 adding a step or two to save time and money.
Yeah.
So
And there's I think, a terrible statistic that 8 out of 10 startups fail. And some of that, and there's many other factors, but some of that may be due that one just quickly launched something and hope for the best instead of validating ideas first and seeing which of this one is really one we want to take to market
yeah,
that's likely to have a
yeah, and,
positive impact.
yeah. And I'm not suggesting like you need tons of data and you need to do all this research for months and months. You can still collect that data pretty quickly and get decent signal, right,
Yeah.
on whether you should move forward or not.
Can you
It's
talk us through an example? Is there one that's shareable or even maybe anonymizedly shareable around where you've gone through this process of
mm,
validation from that need or that pain that's the foundation to then the walls as the value proposition and then creating that prototype for the idea?
sure. Let me try to walk you through. I might actually draw on a couple different examples at different points.
I would love that.
Okay, so one, if we think about going from uh, pain to value prop in that validation process, um, a couple years ago we were working with a large tire manufacturer, and this very global brand, very well known. Also provides automotive services, not just tires, but other kind of automotive services. And they were looking to um, disrupt their business, create a new line of business. And we started looking by just interviewing and having certain guardrails around the automotive industry, found that um, there was a lot of pain with fleet managers. So if you think about all these trucks that are delivering Amazon products and everything else, and they're constantly on the road and they're going everywhere, and it's all about having as many vehicles on the road at once, and really maximizing efficiency. There was a lot of downtime for these vehicles, for getting new tires, oil changes, et cetera,
Mhm.
et cetera. And understanding the pain in that context, um, working with this company, we helped develop this idea around how can we make it easier for managers of fleets to keep their vehicles on the road longer, um, by providing vehicle services specific for fleets during off hours, right? So when these, in wherever they are, right? So basically, kind of like almost like mobile services. So when these trucks would stop somewhere for a few hours in the middle of the night, things could get done, or they could come in and have things scheduled. And it was just a much more automated process, right? And now that's a whole fledging business, and it's done very well. Um, the other example I'll give is a validation from the point of a product solution. And we worked with a construction company that had built some internal software around business intelligence to help them figure out how they staff large construction projects, how they scope these things, like when an airport says we need a whole new wing to the airport or no new terminal, and they hire these construction companies. There's a lot of pieces that go into that, figuring out kind of who and how many and how much and etc. And they developed this software that they thought was the greatest thing in the world. And they said, you know what, this is so good. This software that we use, it helps our business so much that we think that not only other construction companies, but other architecture firms or any company that deals with um, a lot of staff doing multiple projects at once could benefit from. So we ended up doing a lot of interviews with um, different types of stakeholders, and found that, yeah, actually, the idea was really good and people really like this idea. The execution wasn't quite there in terms of the product itself, but the bigger issue was adoption. Is there was a resistance to say, okay, here's we want to scrap our whole back end systems and what we're doing right now, and bring in this new platform to do it for us. So people, even though they recognized the value and thought it was a good idea, it was still very difficult for them to basically sign up and say, "Yeah, let's go for it," because the barrier to entry was just too high. So that was real interesting because when you think about product market fit, right? The desirability is necessary, but it's not the only thing, right? There has to be the feasibility of it, in this case, the adoption, and also the viability that you can actually build it. So you have to kind of look at it from multiple angles. I'm sort of hyper focused on the desirability piece, right? Do people want it? But we have to be mindful of the broader context in which we're working.
Yeah, interesting. So the pain of the switching cost in that situation seems to have been greater than the pain that
Yeah.
existed, that people wanted more efficiency, within the operations, and
Yeah.
that out the pain out the switching pain outweighing the initial pain prevent the people from actually making that switch, and they
Yeah.
stuck with that old solution.
Yeah. The number of times they say, we'll just stick with Excel. We know it's not that great, but Excel works. We all know how to use it. It's not perfect.
Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
talk us through a little bit around how you did the actual validation
hmm
of those two, within those two stories?
Um, yeah. So the first story about the tires, um, one of the interesting things that we did to validate pain is through this. It's a familiar technique. The idea is called constant sum in survey design language, but we did something called the spend exercise, which is just a version of constant sum. Here are
What is
five.
it actually? Well,
So
oh, you're gonna tell me.
yes, I will tell you.
Amazing.
I will
Tell
share with
me.
you and the listeners. Um, we have hypothesized that these are the five big pains that fleet managers feel. Now, I want you to take a look at them. And I want you to add any other pains that are in this context that you feel. Okay, great, Sabrina. You just added two more. So now there's seven pains, and I'm going to give you $100, €100, 100 whatevers to spend to solve each of those pains. All right. Now you don't have to spend everything. If you're not, if there's no pain, then don't spend anything. But most people spend all of the quote money. Um, and people say, "Oh, that pain is significant. I'm going to give $40 for that." This pain is hardly anything. I'll give $5, right? And what that does is it really forces the issue and helps tease apart in terms of the data where you're feeling the most pain. Because people will say, almost all my pain is around staffing. I'm going to give $80 to solve that. All this other stuff, I really don't care that much about, whatever it is. And it's a way to really see the kind of the orders of magnitude or the differences between these pains. And all we need, so for that, we did it with many people, and we're able to look at those pains and what the average spend was, right? And also the differences or the variation between people, and identify these are the top two or three pains. So it's a really simple exercise.
Yeah,
Um,
wonderful.
and the other example with the construction company, um, what we're able to do is essentially we develop kind of a scoring mechanism to validate the product solution. So we would look at things like, is it valuable to you? Is it delivering on a value proposition? Would you also prefer this solution over what you're doing right now? Right.
Hmm.
So, and then the kicker is the adoption. How willing are you to adopt this? Right. So people say it's really valuable, and yeah, I would love to choose this, but the adoption piece was the issue, right? And then we have other things like willingness to pay, and then ideally we get into what we'd call a demonstrated demand. And I think this is really important anytime you're trying to measure product market fit. Is there some behavior that is a good signal around desire, right? It's not just me telling you this is valuable, but I am going to give you my email so I can be put on a wait list when the product becomes available. I want to sign an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. I want to become a pilot customer. I want to schedule a demo, right? These are all indications, signals through your behavior, right? That there is an interest. So we were kind of really trying to um, go at this idea or test or validate product solution from all these different angles, right? So that's what we did with the construction company.
Yeah, fascinating. And for for the company in the second story, where the switching cost was so high, what what did you see? Which method did you use to validate, and what did you see? Did you see that people wouldn't sign up for the trial run, or how did you get that early indication that they're not going to
I
switch?
think what we the method we used was I think we ran about only 20 interviews. It was a very specific audience that we were after. I would have liked to have had a lot more, but we were under some typical time and budget constraints that limited our sample size to 20. Um, and in terms of the demonstrated demand, um, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't recall what signals we were using. It might have been something about signing up to be a potential pilot customer, um, which was difficult.
Yeah,
In most cases, it is because it's a real, um, you know, that's really when it becomes real, right? I can tell you, you know, all these wonderful things that I think you want to hear, but when it comes to the reality, it makes me think of the famous urban myth. Um, whether this is true or not, but at least it illustrates what I'm talking about to a certain extent. Is there's a focus group and they're talking about um, some audio device like let's say it's a wireless speaker and it comes in all these different colors, right? And they ask people, what do you want? Oh, Sabrina says, I want the red one, and Bill, I want the blue one, and somebody else wants the green one. And they say, okay, the session is over. Thank you all for participating in our focus group. Now, as a small thank you, I want all of you to go choose a wireless speaker and take it home with you for free. And everybody chooses the black. So, right. So, what people say and what they do are not often always the same,
yes, it's a nice it's a nice story for sure.
whether it's true or not.
Um,
I'm not sure.
so I'm really curious, having validated um, different steps from the pain and how it's being solved and whether that solution then really is the one that will get adopted. What happens next when you find, yes, we should go forward, or actually maybe
Hmm.
no? How do you have that conversation with your clients or stakeholders around the next steps?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question because it depends on where you are in the process, right? So, obviously, if you're not able to validate the pain, then you need to cast a wider net and go back and do more field research and find the pain, right? If you're able to validate the pain, but the idea, you're not able to validate the value prop, then you need to go back through your ideation and come up with more ideas.
How easy is it to refocus and have that conversation?
I well, on one hand, I think it's easy in the sense that you know how to do that, right? Let's do another lock ourselves in a room and do more ideation, design thinking, and come up with some more ideas, etc. I think politically sometimes it's hard because people are like, oh, we love these ideas. Why do people not like them? Maybe we need to. Maybe it's the wrong audience. No, I really believe that this is the best idea. They just don't know yet.
Yeah.
So there definitely could be resistance to it, but you got to look very carefully at that and say, at least consider the possibility that the data's right or mostly right, and you just didn't come up with the right idea. But
How,
when you know the problem, finding the idea the idea to solve that problem isn't as hard as opposed to just come up with ideas. So it's I'm trivializing it a little bit, but I think that you can go back without too much pain. no
Yeah.
pun intended, and come up with 5 more ideas and see what resonates. Or maybe it's shifting your audience, saying, you know what, maybe we're just talking to the wrong people. Maybe we need to, talk to this group or go into this market. Um, Now, if you're not able to validate the solution, but you're able to validate the idea, then you need to go back and create some new prototypes, new designs, execute the idea differently, right? And put that in front of people. So it really depends. Now, if you can validate the solution, then Greenlight, right? That's why we're Greenlight Idea Lab, right? Going forward is start looking at your business model, your pricing strategy, your go-to-market strategy. Start
Yeah.
building it, right? You've validated the people want your solution. That's great. That's what we all want.
Yeah, and I think that's also an important point that you're not just looking at the product idea, you're looking at the business model, the pricing strategy,
Yeah.
everything that makes up that experience in the end that customers will have with that product. Because even the price is part of the experience. It can create an easy access or barrier to that particular product.
Yeah. Somebody gave a great example. Like, we can design a vending machine that just dispenses money for free, right? It can be very easy to use and people are going to love it. Guaranteed. There's going to be high demand, but the business model doesn't make sense, right? So we have to look at that, and that is a really big part of it. But I think when you talked earlier about, like, why do startups fail, the number one reason is product market fit. And within product market fit, I think the number one reason is the lack of customer desirability for whatever product that they have ultimately,
Yeah.
because you have to have the business behind it, the technical feasibility, all that is really important. But I think that can hopefully be figured out in conjunction with the desirability. But if you don't have the desirability, then there's nowhere to go from there.
Yeah. What are some misconceptions that you've encountered when tackling that topic of measuring product market fit across those
Mm.
different stages?
Yeah, that's a great question. Misconceptions. Well, I think that one misconception is we can get away with putting this in front of a few people. And yeah, okay, so they happen to be some friends of ours who like me, and that's good enough. Um, Everybody wants to move quickly. They want to get to build as fast as they can. And I get that. I understand that. I appreciate that. But at what cost, right? And the idea that, you know, some people would feel comfortable making such an important decision based on limited and flawed data. That's what I just, you know, that's what I kind of struggle with is what is the thinking, right? And it kind of goes back to a deeper psychology around confirmation bias and things like that. But that's really one big misconception, is that we have enough data to move forward. Um,
And how do you navigate that when you encounter that situation with your clients and stakeholders where
yeah,
they say
it's
It's good enough, let's just move, we need to be fast"? How do
eh,
you help them to slow down, do a tiny bit more research, to de-risk their
yeah,
product and their company?
it's it's really hard because uh, at the end of the day, I believe what we do in UX product, it is about relationships. It is about building really good, strong relationships with people. And the last thing we want to do is undermine somebody, attack somebody. We need to understand where they're coming from. With that said, though, we need to very carefully navigate that conversation and say, like, listen, you've poured your heart and your soul, your money into this idea. Let I want this to be successful as much as you do. What can we do to really make this successful? Right? We are on the same page. We share the same goals. And by doing this work, we're able to increase the probability of success, right? And I'm going to save you money in the process. So I think it's really framing it in terms that they'll understand and appreciate, instead of saying, no, 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 you're doing it all wrong, which sometimes I want to do, but I don't, because I am about really understanding that the building that relationship as best I can. So that's really, really critical, in
Yeah.
this process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really great insight around how to navigate that reframing around understanding and emphasizing that you both have a common goal
Yeah.
from which to move forward, and that's a really nice way of creating that kind of campfire around where we then look at how do we move forward together and reevaluating all the different
Mhm.
options that we have. So
Yeah.
it's very powerful. So these are some of the hard situations, navigating the misconceptions. What are some lessons learned that you've, yeah, things that you've still learned along that way? What were some of your highlights around
Mm.
um, measuring that product market fit? And then I'd love to know some lowlights too,
Yeah.
some failures, things that went wrong.
All right. So some things that I've learned, um, and I actually learned this a long time ago, is, um, I don't tr- in many ways I don't trust my intuition for new product ideas. I really don't. I'm a famously bad predictor, of future trends in technology. Just one example of that, I mentioned, for my postdoc, I was working on the design of navigation systems for cars in the mid to late 90s. They were in Japan, but they weren't in the US. I don't know about Europe, but very limited market. And I was like, they'll never work in the US because everybody knows their way around. So I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yes.
I had a big argument with a roommate of mine. We were both living in Seattle, and I said, it was the night before Starbucks went public, and I was arguing with him about don't buy the stock. So anyway, I'm careful to. I don't trust my intuition so much, but I trust data, and I understand how to collect data, um, and what good research methods look like, so I can have more and more trust in the data. I trust what 100 people say much more than what I do. That's one thing that I've learned. The other thing I've come to learn and appreciate, again, is what I just talked about a few minutes ago. It's about relationships, and how I can better build better relationships with people faster, right? I'm old school here, but I like to do something in person. um, Zoom, of course, is super convenient, and I do almost everything via Zoom. But if I get the chance to have a meeting in person with somebody, especially early in a relationship, I'll always take that opportunity. um, I've also come to appreciate, around product market fit, all the other pieces that go into building successful products with successful launches, right? And there's a lot of smart people doing a lot of amazing work in in finding the right, the technical side, the feasibility side, et cetera, that, we really need to look at and appreciate, because, as you said, Sabrina, it's all part of the experience.
Yes.
So, and then the last thing I'll share is specifically around measurement, is that measurement is, um, there's a lot of different ways of measuring, and I don't trust one single metric. I really don't. What I do trust are multiple metrics that are all telling me the same story, where I've collected them different ways, right? And that again is going towards that reliability piece.
Yeah, amazing. These are some really good lessons learned. And I guess these are also part of principles that make you successful at validating ideas. Are there any other principles beyond the lessons learned that you've shared that make you successful in measuring impact?
Um, let's see. Well, I let me just take it a little bit one step. When I look back on my career, and I think what were some pivotal moments in my career that really put me on a certain trajectory, um, or the path that I wanted to be on. Probably the number one thing was meeting people, was going and putting myself out there, conferences, local events, and meeting. That's how we met, right? And building up that network, building those relationships with people in my field. It landed me, it gave me the chance to ultimately work with Tom Tullis, and many, many other wonderful, smart people that I learned a lot from. And I cannot stress that enough is don't just work in a vacuum. Don't just work at home. Meet people, build your network over time. Because whether it's for a job or not doesn't really matter. And it's not like you could just. It's not just about what you gain, but also about what you can give back to. Um, so I think that to me is the number one thing um, that helped, and also as part of that is just being curious all the time, being inquisitive, challenging, questioning things. I mean, that's with product validation. That's exactly what I was doing. Is like, wait, there has to be a smarter way of doing this, right? Where you're not making this multi-million-dollar decision just based on 10 people, are you? Like, let's really stress test this. I know from my research background, there's a better way of doing this. I can really de-risk it. You're not de-risking it right now. You're just going with your gut feel. So, so really questioning, um, questioning things, being curious, learning, is a big part of it too.
Yeah, that very strongly resonates with me. Always be curious, always be questioning.
Yeah.
Um, and especially if we think about innovation, we can't do that in a vacuum. To have
Yeah.
new ideas and to test them, we have to go out and we have to speak to people. So that goes hand in hand for me. So I have a few very last questions, Bill. If someone now wants to start to be more rigorous about how they validate their ideas, what is your recommendation to them on how they can introduce more rigor into their practice?
Well, I think that the first thing is it's important to think about and develop some kind of framework for what that means. What does validation mean? At Greenlight Idea Lab, what we've done is we've come up with 3 sets of scorecards. That's sort of our framework. A scorecard to validate the customer pain, one for the value propositions, and one for the product solution, and set kind of benchmarks of where a product needs to be in order to essentially pass on to the next stage, right? That's what we have, but I would encourage anybody out there to think about and develop their own methodology around product validation and adopt or use other metrics out there. One of the most common metrics is the Sean Ellis test, which basically says um, if we took this product away, left the market, would you be disappointed? And the idea is if more than 40% say yes, I would be really disappointed if this went away. That indicates some product market fit. Now, I love it. It's one question. it's very intuitive. It's a nice way of thinking about it, but the limitation of it is it implies that you need the product already in the market. So what we're doing is we're trying to validate and de-risk before you even get to developing it and putting it into the market. Um, so that's yeah, it's one thing.
And would you see those? You mentioned that you've got those three scorecards at the Greenlight Idea Lab, and you encourage people to create their own. Would you say that these scorecards will be very different depending on industry or domain where we're applying them, or would you see that there's maybe something converging on a more standard way of measuring or approaching that?
I think it's a fairly standard way. I don't know the factors or the variables within each of those scorecards are going to be pretty agnostic and are going to work kind of across product, across industry. There could be some things that are so unique about one product where there isn't a willingness to pay, for example, or certainly the demonstrated demand that's going to change what that looks like. But conceptually, it should work across product. That's was sort of the main reason for developing it that way. But look at your product and see what's out there and how can we adapt what's out there to better suit our needs. But it really starts with developing that methodology and then figuring out, okay, what are the research techniques? What I strongly believe, no surprise, in a mixed methods approach,
Yeah.
right? You utilize the qual to get the insights into why, the quant, what, how many, how much. Together, that's a much stronger picture than just using one or the other.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. If we only have one or the other, we're missing part of the picture.
Hmm. Yeah.
What would be a pro tip? So, someone who's already like super good at measuring
Uh-huh.
and validating with rigor, is there a pro tip that you would recommend to them to say, like, wow, you can take it one step further? Or,
Oh, it's a good idea. Okay, it's a great question. What I would say is what you want to do over time is start to build up like a normative database so you understand when we hit these numbers, we're much more likely to be successful, right? And that will really help make a greater impact in your organization is to say, all right, when we get to a 90% in terms of um, you know uh, having people essentially say it's somewhat or very severe of a problem that that end up resulting in a much better product. So really being able to kind of mine the data retrospectively after the fact could give you much more reliability and refinement of your methodology. If that makes sense. Um, so that's sort of a pro tip that can only be done over time.
yeah,
So
so the recommendation is to build up kind of your own benchmark data
yeah,
from different ideas that you've tried out
yeah,
that reached certain thresholds. You were able to look at how successful were they or not, having
yeah,
reached that threshold. And by having that benchmark data, you can then, with new ideas, say, hey, we've reached this. We're now in a really good space to move forward. So,
yeah,
in a way, it helps then to get buy in from stakeholders and building that confidence to say, hey, let's give it a go, because based on previous experience, this has a really good shot at being successful.
yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. Bill, thank you so much for all the wonderful insights. I have one final question that's around the name of the podcast. So, this podcast is called Creating Better Products. So, why is it so important that we measure product market fit to create better products?
I believe that the measurement is um, ultimately is one of the best ways you have to ensure you're launching successful products into the market. You're bringing products in that are going to resonate with your customers, that are going to be more successful for your business. Without the measurement, you really don't know. Ultimately, you really don't know. You're really taking a gamble. You need to measure to de-risk, to increase the probability of success. Plain and simple. It's not, that's not rocket science. Otherwise, um, launch and you'll find out one way or the other.
That's true. Bill, thank you so much
Thank you.
for all the inspiring insights. Now, I would love to know what are some books or podcasts or articles that you've read recently that have inspired you,
Yeah.
that our listeners should look at and might get inspired too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things out there that I would recommend. Um, the Testing Business Ideas, David Bland. I really like his style. I really think he puts um, kind of product market fit in a nice context, especially around product validation. A former graduate student of mine, Tomer Sharon, wrote a book a number of years ago on validating product ideas. And Alvarez, the lean customer development. And customer development is kind of an interesting take on what we do in thinking of in terms of research and our outreach is those become our first pilot customers ultimately. So that's a really interesting perspective. Um, and then at this point, I'll give a plug for the Journal of User Experience, which I've been co-editor of for a long time now. It's the only peer-reviewed journal in the UX space, and check that out. It's free for everybody. Really, the best, the latest insights around UX research. There's a lot of podcasts. I'll also give a plug for my book, Measuring the User Experience, too. I actually have the fourth edition is going to be coming out in 2026, and I'll have a new chapter just devoted towards product market fit. So I'm excited to write that. But I would just really encourage everybody to go out there and just consume as much in as many different formats as they can, whether it's videos, blogs, podcasts, books, peer-reviewed papers. Really, just it's all out there. Go find stuff that's going to be helpful for you.
Thank you, Bill. It's been really inspiring. Now, if people would love to reach out to you or follow your writing and thinking as it evolves, where can they find you?
Well, the first thing I'll say is Greenlight Idea Lab, greenlightidealab.com. Check out our website. We're just launched a new tool to do an assessment about whether you're ready to launch a product from a desirability standpoint. So check that out. And connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll follow up with everybody personally. I'm always looking to make new connections. And then if you want to visit the journal, uxpajournal.org. And yeah, I'm all over the web, so come find me.
Amazing. Bill, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's been truly inspiring. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Now, a question to our listeners. A question to you. What is your experience with validating product ideas? How do you measure product market fit? What were your successes and setbacks in doing that? I would love to hear about your experience, so please reach out to me directly or write something in the comments because it's cool. Please share your experience with me. I would love to hear from you. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please share it with your network and give us a like and subscribe in your favorite streaming platform. By doing this, you help to elevate the voice of our amazing guests. And today, this was Bill Albert. Thank you, and see you next time.